and planted the Indian flag, we would have conquered you. And the English were like, yep, that's how this works. We got you. So there was a little bit of psyching them out, right? That was also going on. So, when the English had done this, they decided that they needed to make this idea of the East. There needed to be this concept of the East, the other, the nefarious, the sneaky, the mysterious, the strange. And so they came up with this idea of making the East being basically Asia, and then going from there. Now, the Romans had this a little bit, and the Greeks had this a little bit. So it wasn't that the English made it up completely from their own minds. For the Greeks, it was the Persians. For the Romans, it was still the Persians. And so the English kind of had, oh yeah, this worked really well for the Greeks and the Romans. We want to have this for ourselves. So what they did was they named the far end of Asia the Far East. They took the southern middle part of Asia and they called it the Middle East. And then they took the western end of Asia and they called it the Near East because it was near Europe. In other words, what we call the Middle East was the Near East. What we call South Asia was the Middle East. The Near East is what we call the Middle East today. What we call South Asia today was the Middle East. But then the Cold War started. And we Americans went, we can keep this East-West thing going, but now we need the Russians to be the East, because the East is evil and dangerous and exotic and strange. So we'll make the Russians the new Near East, and we'll do the Eastern Bloc states as the new Near East. But if that's the Near East, then the Middle East can't be the Near East anymore. So we renamed the Near East the Middle East, but then we needed a new name for the old Middle East, so we named it South Asia in our new naming scheme. The Eastern Bloc states and the Soviet Union, it never caught. Nobody started calling that the Near East. But they did call it the East and the Eastern Bloc. In other words, it partially worked. It worked well enough. It got what they wanted. And now, in effect, what they had done was they had successfully divorced East Germany East from Western civilization in the minds of people. But this isn't the first time that somebody has divorced Western civilization from the minds of people. We had already done it to Egypt and Iraq. Right? I just got through showing you that the West was founded in Egypt and Iraq, and yet somehow we believe it's not in the West. In fact, even Middle Easterners will say it's not in the West. It's part of everybody's understanding of the world now. And this is, of course, at the heart of Orientalism, because the goal is to make it seem that the East is irrational. It's inefficient. It's authoritarian. And the West is democratic and liberated. And everybody's happy. It's all about ice cream. We build it into everything. So I don't know if you've ever watched The Man in the High Tower. It's probably not worth watching. The first season is. The first season was really, really amazing. But then after that, it kind of falls apart a little bit. And you could tell they just didn't know where to go. But it's about what would have happened if Japan and Germany had won World War II. And so it's really weird watching Americans walking around in SS uniforms, goose stepping around. It's just like, oh God. So the first season, the whole time you keep thinking, oh, this is horrific. Well, not to ruin the story for you in case you haven't seen it, but at one point, there is a good Japanese, right? That's a fun trope. Good Japanese, bad Japanese, right? We do this all the time. Good Native American, bad Native American. That's how we it's Downton Abbey. Everybody upstairs is wonderful. Some of the people downstairs are wonderful, but some of the people downstairs are not wonderful. Because we all know there are good lower class people, there's scum lower class people, but upper class people are all wonderful. Because the guy who wrote Downton Abbey, of course, is a member of the nobility, and so it's a giant propaganda piece. Just remember, also he villainizes gay people, which is interesting that Americans like this show so much. I've lost my train of thought. Can you edit this? The Near East, Middle East thing. And then, why did I get into Downton Abbey?
You were talking about Orientalism and the idea that they're trying to make the others the bad guys.
Oh, I know it was. It was the good Japanese, the bad Japanese. There we go. So there's this good Japanese guy, and he's trying to figure out the mess that they're in, because the Japanese are controlling California and they can barely hold on to it. Things are falling apart, and they know that the Nazis are coming for them. Because, right, of course they are. It's just, of course, why would you make it ever anything with the Nazis? They're eventually going to come for you. They went for each other, right? The Nazis spent a huge chunk of their time killing each other, trying to move up in rank. So this Japanese guy, I'm trying not to ruin this, but there's a scene where he figures out what would have happened if Japan and Germany hadn't conquered the United States. And what he sees is children licking ice cream. And I thought, really? That's what you went to? That was the big moment, the big breakthrough moment. There's balloons and there's children licking ice cream. That's the difference? That was the qualitative difference that you saw between Nazism and what we have? Surely there's something more. So now I need to get into the conversation of identity, because a part of all of this is identity. So a few years ago, I had a conversation with a Christian Egyptian woman, a Coptic woman. And she said, I'm an Easterner, and we in the East. And I was like, wow, here we go. She's saying, I'm an Easterner. She's embraced this idea. So now we need to get into identity. We do something really interesting with identity. Identity is complicated, and that's part of this problem because it's nested in the concept of Western civilization. So in other words, when I talk about Western civilization, I can't help but also then talk about identity, because it plays such a massive role in the way we shape our conversations, the way we understand who we are as individuals, but also what we understand other people to be, because this is part of the otherizing process. So, this identity conversation, I want to bring up something interesting. And it'll seem weird, but when you think about it, it's the right thing to do, especially since I brought up the Irish earlier. Just to be clear, I didn't like that book, How the Irish Saved Civilization. I love the Irish. So when the English start the next round of the Troubles, when they pull Northern Ireland out of the EU, and the Irish go no, and stuff starts getting blown up, and people start getting shot again because the English are idiots and they Brexited, I'm going to be on Ireland's side. I'm outing myself right now. When we talk about American presidents, you will hear people say, Kennedy is the first Irish president. That's an interesting statement because it's a loaded statement. He probably isn't. And the reason I'm saying that is we've had 46 presidents, and 23 of them had Irish ancestry, including Andrew Jackson and James K. Polk and U.S. Grant. Now, I don't think 3 men walked around going, I am Irish American. But then when you say Kennedy's the first Irish president, it's kind of weird, because what are you saying? That because they didn't identify as Irish first, they're not Irish? And what we really mean is Kennedy was the first Catholic president. Right? You see what I'm saying? Like, for example, if I told you Reagan was Irish, does that come as a surprise? If you're my age, it probably doesn't, because there was conversation about Reagan being Irish in the 80s, because the Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill, was also Irish. And so there was this weird thing where there was this Catholic Irish Speaker of the House and this Protestant Irish president, and they were hanging out and friends. And they were friends. One was a Democrat, one was a Republican, but they liked each other and they got bills passed. They worked together. So there was